Welcome to Kindness Rising, your morning dose of humanity, of hope, and of heart. I'm Matthew Roof, the Uncommon Kindness Guy, and I'm here every morning at 7:30 a.m. to bring you a wake-up call and a dose of humanity, hope, and heart. On Kindness Rising, we always like to challenge conventional thinking. We bring some research, but we think about and talk about all the things that can make life just a little bit more positive and a little bit more different. And today is no different than that. We're actually going to lean in this morning up to the news. Yesterday, we learned of the unfortunate and passing of Ozzy Osbourne. I'd call it untimely, but most of us were wondering how he actually lived as long as he did. But actually, Ozzy is probably one of the most misunderstood icons of music. And I think it really matches with what we try to do here on Kindness Rising. Ozzy Osbourne, most people think of as the bat biting and drug influenced crazy maniac of the 70s with Black Sabbath and 80s with his Wizard of Oz. But Ozzy was really, really kind at heart. He's the dark prince of kindness. And I want to talk a little bit about that. The fact that when uh, people, especially our icons, our heroes that are out there in the world, what they reflect on the outside, but what's really going on underneath. We do a lot of that at Mornings in the Lab and at the Business Athletes Performance Laboratory. Ozzy, no doubt, was a crazy entertainer, a maniac, just pure energy and wild. But underneath, Ozzy had a heart, a real heart, and nothing's more demonstrative of that than what happened over the past couple of weeks. Probably many know that Ozzy gave what he announced as his last concert, and clearly it was. He was called somewhere else. But what most people don't know is from that concert, Ozzy and his family, the Osbournes, who's had tremendous success over the years, didn't make a dime. They donated $190 million from that event, all to charity. That's amazing impact and influence that a person can have. But what's even more important and what's more telling and more heartwarming for me wasn't the $190 million. It's the story of the gifts and the gift specifically that he gave at that time. There's a VJ from the 1990s from MTV that Ozzy was related to, and it's no secret that Ozzy had some sicknesses underneath all the crazy behaviors, neurological disorders, and other things. Uh, excuse me, that impacted his life. There was a gentleman, a VJ from the 90s, who had similar things. In the midst of all that chaos of that final concert and being able to earn enough money, 190 million to give to charity, Ozzy had a handmade cane made for this man who is also experiencing the neurological effects of his disease. And he gave that cane to the individual before the show while he's waiting for hundreds of thousands, millions of people watching it on television. He's giving a gift of himself, about himself, and a connection with a human being. And that was the magic of Ozzy, not the Blizzard of Oz, not the Crazy Train, not the Paranoid, all that amazing music that he made. I used to listen to Ozzy, the tribute album with Randy Rhoads is my pump up song for high school hockey, or my pump up album. Amazing, amazing music that really drove energy, but it was the heart underneath that made Ozzy special. He will be missed. R.I.P. Ozzy Osbourne. His influence beyond his family to kids everywhere, to people everywhere, will be felt for a long time. And that's the kind of conventional thinking we like to flow against here at Kindness Rising. And today we're going to talk about another topic that is similar. That topic is tough conversations. All week long, we're talking about communication. We're talking about the things that make us great communicators, the challenges that we have with communication, and the influence that conversations, dialogue, and being open can have. Today, we're going to talk about tough conversations. And I'm going to ask a question. How is telling someone bad news or challenging them or giving them critical feedback kind? It's actually one of the kindest things we can do. And as a matter of fact, it's really unkind to not do that. We're not protecting people, we're robbing them and ourselves of opportunities to improve, to build, and to grow when we don't address the difficult things. But we have to go in with the right mindset. We're going to talk about that mindset, that it's not about winning and losing. It's not about making sure that the person takes our side on something when we have a conversation or a confrontation. It's about empathy, it's about understanding, and it's ultimately about growth. We're going to lean into the research. We're going to tell stories from business and from personal worlds. I'm going to tell my personal stories, and we're going to get into this idea of tough conversations being the heart of what we can do to really grow as individuals and make a difference in the world. We're going to talk about research from right here in my hometown, Binghamton University, that improving working relationships and a tool for coping with stress is having those difficult conversations. It's about validating, supporting, and having the right tone in our conversations that make all the difference. We'll talk about Gallup's research that found that having one difficult conversation per week and finding more than anything, more than anything, that's the influence that we can have as leaders. When I was a leader in healthcare organizations, leading hundreds of people to giving care, I used a strategy called management by walking around. That management by walking around was just touching base with people every day so that when the difficult conversations had to happen, there was rapport, there was credibility. And it wasn't some manipulative thing. It was genuine empathy, interest in people's lives, both personally and professionally, so that when it came down to having the inevitable difficult conversation, we could have that and know that we're coming from the same place, a place of improvement, a place of growth. Here's the thing, for a long, long time, and still to this day, I was an avoider of that. Man, I would get so stressed out about having those deep conversations. I would run and escape. I would hide from them because of the way that it made me feel. But when I started to realize that having those difficult conversations, setting the mindset, setting the tone for the conversation, that it's about us together improving, having empathy and compassion for each other, and being able to set that tone correctly to have that difficult conversation, it got a lot easier for me, a lot easier for the other people that I was having conversations with, and ultimately drove growth and development of ourselves and our organizations. We want to reframe our mindset around these conversations. It's not about, again, it's not about winning. It's not about making sure that people know our perspective. It's about opening up with empathy. This week on Mornings in the Lab, we had a guest, Dr. Rachel Mayer, who's a clinical psychologist, and she talked about some of the very difficult conversations she's had to have in her life around her relationships with people. And she gave us a really great nugget of information, a way to set the tone. A lot of times when we're having these conversations, a decision needs to be made ultimately, but you have to start with a dialogue. So just by saying right in the beginning of the conversation, listen, this is not a decision we're making right now. We're just having a dialogue. That de-escalates. That helps people to open up. It helps us to open up and feel like we have psychological safety in the conversation to be able to express ourselves. It takes all the pressure off. This is not a decision, it's a dialogue. I love that. I'm going to be leaning into it in my personal life and in my business life to make this just a little less scary for everyone and to really uh, get the benefit of that organization, of that conversation. Excuse me. So I want to ask you a question. What conversations have you been avoiding? What have you been hiding from? What have you been scared to talk to your friends, your family, your coworkers, your boss about? Think about those things. And then let's talk about some strategies that will help to make that just a little bit easier for you, to clear the air about how you're feeling, to get rid of those old resentments that you've been carrying you. And I promise that those tough conversations will turn into a profound act of kindness for yourself and for others. It's not just about getting something done, about getting that decision made. It's actually love and kindness in action. So let's get to the heart of our show today. Let's explore how difficult conversations can become the greatest tool that we have for spreading kindness. As always, we lean into the kindness spotlight. Kindness spotlight is our chance to talk about an organization that's out there in the world making a difference with the work that they do, a nonprofit, a charity, a social impact organization. And this one we're going to talk about is really a great organization that's having impact all across our institutions, prisons, schools, businesses, families, most importantly, and driving change through empathy. The name of the organization is the Center for Nonviolent Communication. They were founded in 1984 by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who's an international star and leader in the world of peacemaking. And their mission statement is pretty profound. We support the transformation of how we speak to ourselves and each other, one empathetic conversation at a time. And Dr. Rosenberg himself is quoted as saying this: what I want in my life is compassion, a flow between myself and others based on mutual giving from the heart. And that's what it's really all about. It's not inside in our brain. It's what's in our hearts that's going to make the difference. So the Center for Nonviolent Communication, they're in schools. I said they're in prisons. They're actually in war zones, guiding peace talks. They're in businesses and family. They're all about social change, restorative justice, and real results. And here's some examples of the impact that they've had. Let's talk about Microsoft. Again, one of our largest organizations, most impactful organizations in the world. Satya Nadella, you may know the name. She was brought into Microsoft some years ago to make cultural transformation. At the time, Microsoft was a very cutthroat organization. People climbing to the top, walking over each other, infighting, and just absolute tension was what Microsoft was defined as. She wanted to move the organization from that to one of collaboration and growth. And her very first act was to require every single one of her leaders in the organization to read the book that was written by the Center for Nonviolent Communication, called Nonviolent Communication, A Language for Life. The ultimate impact of that is during that time period, their market values, Microsoft's market value, went up to $250 billion. But underneath there were the measures of employee satisfaction and innovation and growth that could not have happened without breaking that tension, moving from cutthroat to collaboration. Another great example is something that's happening in schools. There was an Ohio school district that was really focused and struggling with bullying in their district. This has been a topic for a while now. I know my kids, we got a lot of bullying training as parents. The kids got a lot. But the Center for Nonviolent Communication went into this school district. They wanted to move the culture from one of punishment for the bullies to one of teaching, from detention and suspension to empathy and honesty. They wanted to make it safer in the schools. And ultimately through their work, they saw a 60% drop in student incidents. And again, that's amazing stats. But again, down to the personal level, a quote from a kid who went through this program. I love this. I learned that the kid who was mean to me was actually scared and lonely. We both cried, and now we are friends. What's better than that? Two kids not really understanding each other, one picking on the other, causing the other one to have their own problems, but inside that child was hurting himself. And by opening up the conversation to a nonviolent conversation, opening up to empathy and caring, those two kids became friends. That's pretty amazing. The Center for Nonviolent Communication is having a massive impact beyond Ohio school districts, beyond Microsoft. They have 750 plus trainers in 65 countries and are providing over 1,000 trainings annually. The book, Nonviolent Communication, A Language for Life, has sold over 6 million copies and been translated into 35 plus languages. And the main message is this: we can disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. We can address problems by not attacking each other, by having the hardest conversations while still honoring each other's humanity. It's a better way to communicate, one empathetic conversation at a time. So that's the Center for Nonviolent Communication. I encourage you to go check them out. Read the book. I'm going to get it and read it. I think it sounds like an amazing book. I haven't read it, honestly, but I'm interested because of the research that I've done about it, and I'm ready to continue to learn and grow. And that's what we do here every day on Kindness Rising. We learn, we grow, we open up our hearts to empathy and to collaboration. That's the word I'm looking for. So that was our Kindness Spotlight, Center for Nonviolent Communication. I hope you'll check them out. We're going to move on now to our uncommon good news. We always like to talk about some deeper research into business and into the impact that these concepts have, and talk a little bit about that before we get into the personal challenge for ourselves and how we can have influence on our lives with these concepts. So here's a couple of examples of how businesses. Again, I talked about Microsoft, but let's talk next about the other major or another major institution, organization in the world of information technology, and that's Google. Alphabet. Google's Project Aristotle that they held between 2012 and 2015 was a study of hundreds of teams within the organization to figure out what makes them successful and what makes them challenged. They went into it thinking their hypothesis was that it was the smartest teams. It was the one with the most resources, and the most similarities were what makes the difference in those teams. What they found was profoundly different. It's actually the teams that create psychological safety, places where there's no fear or judgment or concern about being punished for taking a leap, for speaking your mind. They learned that teams could have tough conversations, and the ones that have them early and often were the teams that solve problems the most. They make better decisions and ultimately deliver better results for their customers. There's another company, the Ryan Companies. They're a small company, a medium-sized company out in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. They're a construction firm, and they were having the same kind of issues that most of our businesses do. Very common problems. Managers who avoid performance discussions because they don't want to confront, or the ones that do, were having problems with morale after the fact. They had high turnover. They in the construction industry, there's very much a culture of being tough, right? Of that masculine associated features that are related to toughness and grit and grind and holding back and swallowing our feelings, all those things. The leaders of Ryan Industries, the Ryan Companies, went into this and said, we're going to figure this out. We're not just going to say tough it out, grow a thicker skin, suck it up. All those things we often hear. They're going to teach empathy. They're going to have growth, not confrontation. And what ended up happening is they improved their outcomes. They had better quality of work, ultimately, better employee retention, better customer retention, and growth. And this is what one leader said following that training on non-confrontation, or on having those difficult conversations. I used to dread having to give difficult feedback. Now I see these conversations as gifts I can give to help my team members grow. It's completely changed how I lead. So let's lean into those tough conversations and we can have an impact. Let's get to that research from Binghamton University, the discovery that changes how leaders talk. But what's really important about this research is they found that it didn't just solve the immediate problems; it helped relationships become stronger and organizations not just survive but thrive. Again, a quote from a participant in that training. I used to think that having a tough conversation with someone meant our relationship was in trouble. Now I realize that avoiding the tough conversation is what puts relationships in trouble. That's why we want to lean into this. We don't want to be harsh. We don't want to be confrontational. We want to show that we care enough to have the hard conversations to lead our organizations and grow. Kindness and tough conversations aren't the opposites. They're partners in creating kind workplaces and communities that we all want to be a part of. That's today's kindness news. So it's 7:50. It's the time we get into our kindness call. I'm going to jump into the comments here and see who's out there and around. Uh, of course, Bernard, be driven. Appreciate you always. Lady Drew leaning into Ozzy Osbourne. Lady Drew, I don't know if you're an Ozzy fan. I am, and I would encourage people to actually go out there and really listen to some of the lyrics. Songs like "Believer" that are all about lifting people up. People think he was like this satanic, crazy guy, but if you listen to that, you listen to Crazy Train. These are songs that are about actually hope and humanity and fighting the powers that hold us down. So thank you very much for chiming in about Ozzy. We really, really appreciate it. And I hope that Lady Drew and Be Driven, I see her in there in the comments. I hope whatever issues you're having with Spectrum get resolved because we want you here every day. And then we've got Peaches. Peaches is another one of our friends who joins us regularly at Mornings in the Lab. Peaches, thanks for joining my show. 4:30 a.m. You're out west. Wow. Thank you for joining so early, getting up and getting after it every day. Thank you so much, Peaches. Keep commenting. Encourage your friends to come join the show, 7:30 a.m. Eastern, Kindness Rising, and we'll get up and get after it every day with doses of hope, humanity, and heart, and a little bit of positivity to get our day started. So let's roll into our kindness call. Kindness call is our segment where we talk about how we can take some of the ideas, the concepts that we're talking about in each of our programs and bring it to our lives and really move from thought to action with a kindness call. Yesterday we had the question quest. We talked about asking good questions. I hope you're out there doing that, asking great questions, learning how to do that, leaning into that. And today we're going to talk about the courage connection because that's what having tough conversations takes. A little bit of courage, a little bit of self support, and understanding that when we lead with empathy and heart and make it not about winning or losing, but about growth together, tough conversations become what moves us forward. So let's talk about the courage connection. I talked about how it starts with a mindset when we go into these difficult conversations. And here's some questions that I think everyone should ask themselves, and ones that I'm learning to ask myself before I have to go into a tough conversation. How can I approach this conversation in a way that honors this person's dignity? We want to make sure that we're thinking about the other person, not just what we're going to win and what we're going to get out of the conversation. Another question you could ask yourself and ask the other person: what outcome would be best for both of us, not just for me? How can I show up with curiosity instead of judgment? We all bring things, our biases to the world, but by asking good questions, leaning into empathy, we can push past those biases and really get ourselves into conversations that move us forward. It's about authentic engagement, genuinely responding. It's about vulnerability, sharing that we know that this is scary. We want to take a breath and summon the courage to have that difficult conversation and make that deeper connection that we all desire and we know is just going to make our lives and the lives of the people we're working with better. Other important things to remember: this is tough stuff. Having these tough conversations, we all have to have them. But remember, you're not alone in this. On Kindness Rising and Mornings in the Lab, we're here to support you. We encourage you to engage in the comments. Reach out to us in the DMs when you're struggling. If you have a problem, something you want to talk about, myself, Keith, John Anderson, all the people who are involved in our organization want what's best for you and what's best for the world. And that's how we're going to move everyone forward with positivity. So please reach out to us. Know you're not alone in it. That's a key thing. Everyone has to go through these things, these tough conversations to get through what we need in our lives, to get what we want out of our lives, to get connected to the people we love. So that's today's show. Tough conversations. There's tons of research out there about having conversations. I encourage you to lean into the mindset of empathy and caring and thinking about the other person, getting out of our own heads when we have to go into these tough conversations. A lot of times we anticipate response, and most of the times we don't get what we think. What we think. So go into it with open mind, open hearts, open ears. Really listen, absorb before you respond when you have these tough conversations. Ask a lot of good questions of people. Make sure that you're setting the tone that this is about us. It's not about me. It's not about you. And you can do that by reducing some tension. We talked about Rachel Muir. I love this, and it's just something that I've really been thinking about since she brought it to us. This is not about a decision. A lot of times when we go into thinking, what do we have to accomplish from this conversation? Nothing gets accomplished because we're so focused on what we have to accomplish. It's kind of a paradox. But when we say this is just a dialogue, that can move the needle forward and maybe even get you to that decision faster and with more collaboration and with more engagement and people really embracing the decisions that we make. So thank you very much again for joining me here on Kindness Rising. Please come back every day, 7:30 a.m. Kindness Rising on YouTube, at Kindness Rising, at Mornings in the Lab, at Matthew Roof. Stick around at 8 o'clock for Mornings in the Lab with Keith and Friends. Some amazing things happening over there today. Keith is going to have a conversation about fathers and sons. I know I'm going to lean into that, even though my dad's not around. I'm a father, and I want to learn and grow in that. So stick around for that conversation and all the important pieces about our health and our growth that we get from the Mornings in the Lab conversation. Also, don't forget that I'm looking for guests here on Mornings in the Lab. Had a conversation yesterday with an amazing woman who I think is going to join us pretty soon. She's doing this really cool project out in Ohio where she's changing the lives of the kids that are growing up in the school district that she grew up in. She saw a need for change and she took action along with a bunch of other women in their community to change the lives of the young girls and young women in their community. So I'm excited to bring her. Let's keep an ear out for Emily, who's gonna join us and have that conversation. Lastly, I want to just talk about Visibility Project. At Kindness Rising, our goal is to really focus on amplifying voices, and my Uncommon Kindness business is to amplify the voices of good people doing good work. We want to multiply kindness and unlock growth for those organizations. And one way to do it is to bring visibility. So if you or someone you know is a part of a nonprofit, a charity, a social impact organization that wants to get your voice heard, you're so focused on your mission that you forget to talk about it and get it out there. I'm here to help you do that, to give you strategies and real tools that can help you grow. So think about it. The Visibility Project. Again, I'll be dropping links during the show. I keep forgetting to do that, frankly, but this is not about a commercial for me. Although I am giving a little plug here at the end. Hit that subscribe button. Join Kindness Rising every day, 7:30 a.m. Stick around for Mornings in the Lab. Come find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Substack, all the major platforms. We're out there spreading kindness through social media, getting people to wake up with positivity, hope, humanity, and heart. So thank you very much to everyone who's come this far with us. We're going to keep on going. And as I say every day, stay uncommon and stay kind.